Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, where we track the changes to our world and investigate some of the potential solutions to the climate crisis. Now, an Australian billionaire has told Sky News that he'll be opening an advanced battery plant in Oxfordshire this year, creating up to 300 jobs. Well, it comes, of course, just a day after the battery startup Britishvolt collapsed and abandoned plans for a gigafactory in the UK. Well, the iron ore magnate Andrew Forrest says he'll be expanding the operations at Williams Advanced Engineering, which he bought last year. Our economics and data editor Ed Conway sent us this report from Davos.
We're here at the World Economic Forum in Davos. A lot of talk, of course, at the moment about the battery industry. There's been bad news recently in the UK about that. Britishvolt, seen as one of the great hopes, has gone into administration. Well, I bring some good news, which is that there is a new battery factory which is about to be opened in Oxfordshire. This is the first we've heard of it. It is being funded by a man called Andrew Forrest, who's one of the world's richest men. He made his money through mining. He's Australian. And he bought, just last year, a company called Williams Advanced Engineering. It's the spin-off to the famous F1 team. It is going to be making advanced batteries, the kinds of things that will go into big trucks, potentially mining trucks, and indeed motorcycles and other applications in the future. It's not quite the same as the kind of gigafactory that people were hoping for at Britishvolt in Blythe, but it does potentially mean more jobs in the UK funded by this new factory. Here's what he had to say to us just a little bit earlier on.
Last year we started building a large factory in Kidlington. We'll open it in April. It will employ hundreds and hundreds of new British jobs, and that's only the start. I want to expand it from there. Then I want to take that technology to Australia, to North America, really stop the British brain drain, really bring the smartest engineers, which are British and they're scattered all over the world, bring them home, bring them back to us.
So that was Andrew Forrest, and potentially up to 300 new jobs to be created in this factory. With all of the bad news about batteries at the moment, here for once is a little bit of good news.
Exactly, Ed Conway there. Now let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news for you today. And the United Nations Secretary-General has said the world is flirting with climate disasters. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, in his keynote speech, Antonio Guterres claimed climate change and the Ukraine war were interlinked challenges, which he says are piling up like cars in a chain reaction crash.
The commitment to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees is nearly going up in smoke. Without further action, we are headed to a 2.8 degree increase, and the consequences, as we all know, would be devastating. Several parts of our planet would be uninhabitable, and for many, it will mean a death sentence.
Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary says the airline company will expand its flight schedule, including the addition of new domestic routes from London to Belfast, Edinburgh and Cornwall. Well, it comes after the government cut air passenger duty on domestic flights from April, in a move, of course, criticised by environmental campaigners. When asked about the environmental impact, Mr O'Leary said he didn't feel any concern, as the flights would be on what he called an environmentally friendly aircraft. Nature organisations have said new legislation could lead to the loss of environmental protections for wildlife and cost the UK tens of billions of pounds. The retained EU law bill is designed to make it easier for the government to replace EU law after Brexit, but Wildlife and Countryside Link say the change could put hundreds of laws that protect nature at risk of being reversed. They say weakening EU laws could cost the UK £82 billion over 30 years. Now, TotalEnergies has said it expects to pay an extra $2.1 billion to the UK and EU from its 2022 earnings as a result of recent windfall taxes on the sector. In Britain, where Total is the second biggest oil and gas producer in the North Sea, the energy profits levy increased from 25% to 35%, which means they'll pay an extra $1 billion to the UK. Thousands of Environment Agency workers are walking out today due to a pay dispute with the government. River inspectors, flood forecasting officers, coastal risk management officers and staff at the Thames Barrier are among those striking after refusing to do voluntary overtime last month. Well, Unison says there are major staffing shortages right across the agency as salaries have fallen by more than 20% compared to inflation since 2010. Right. New analysis from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit shows renewables have overtaken gas to become the biggest single source of power on the UK grid so far this winter. Well, power generated by wind, hydro and solar reached a new record, which means the UK was less reliant on gas. So if we take a look at our data dashboard, we can see that the renewables are still producing just around over 40% of our power today, despite the more settled weather. Right, so to discuss these findings further is Jess Ralston, energy analyst at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, who carried out this analysis. Good afternoon to you, Jess. Good to have you with us. How significant is this development? I mean, it sounds like really good news.
Good afternoon. Well, yeah, it's really significant and it is good news. As we know at the moment, during this gas crisis, every swoosh of a wind turbine blade helps us buy less gas, which is very costly, and it helps improve our energy security because we're not relying on those foreign imports of gas to get our power.
Right, so are we keeping up, though, with demand? Do we need much more? And I'm saying that because just yesterday we reported on the Climate Show that oil and gas licences are being handed out by the government. And, of course, that's not great for the environment, campaigners say. So how much more do we need?
Well, the UK's current target is to triple, or actually just over triple, our current offshore wind capacity. And that's similar to what the whole of the EU is aiming for. So we do have strong targets in this area. But of course, as we know, targets don't always mean delivery. And the government at the moment is dragging its feet somewhat on onshore wind, which is actually even cheaper than offshore wind. So if it starts to get its ducks in a row on offshore wind, help people build those wind turbines that we see offshore and help people build them onshore as well, we can definitely make the most of this opportunity. We're such a windy nation, you know, it seems silly not to.
That's a very good point there. And as we were just saying, even on settled days, we're doing pretty well when we were looking at our data dashboard. So where is Britain as far as global renewables are concerned? Are we doing pretty well?
Absolutely. So we had early subsidies back in the 2000s and the 2010s, which really helped to build our capacity in offshore wind and helped grow those supply chains from a smaller startup type industry to now a global superpower when it comes to offshore wind. And this is very much a global trend. So the US and China, they're investing hundreds of billions, that's billions, not millions, into offshore wind and wind power in general. And that's because they see it as the next big industry. They're seeing it as a growth area. And the UK's got a strong record, but we do have a risk of falling behind if we continue to drag our heels on some policy and some decision making, particularly when it comes to onshore wind.
OK, and Jess, how do we compare with last winter, for example?
Well, last winter was a bit of an oddball because we weren't in the same sort of gas crisis and we were coming out of the COVID pandemic. So it's a different situation now. But today we know that wind and renewables in general are very much helping us to get over the gas crisis. They're helping to keep bills lower than they would be otherwise. And they're helping to displace that expensive gas off the system so we don't have to pay for it.
OK, some encouragement for the future. Jess Ralston from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Good to have you with us on the Climate Show. Thank you. Now, before we go, just a reminder that the Climate Show with Tom Heap is on Saturday and Sunday. That's at 3:30 in the afternoon and 7:30 p.m. in the evening. And we're back tomorrow at 3:30 in the afternoon again. See you then.